It starts as a whisper in the corridor, then becomes a shockwave. The Queen's jewels, long treated like untouchable symbols of legacy, are suddenly in transit, and nobody can explain why. But before Charles can lock down the story, Anne and Sophie step in with a coordinated move, so precise it feels rehearsed. This isn't a family disagreement. This is a power struggle over history itself, and Catherine is about to become the center of it. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. In the monarchy, jewels aren't accessories. They're authority you can hold in your hand. They're legitimacy made visible, tradition made tangible, a message delivered without speaking. The Queen's jewels, especially those pieces, carry centuries of meaning, a silent announcement of who represents continuity and who stands at the center of the crown's future. That's why the first whisper doesn't sound like gossip, it sounds like alarm. In transit. Two simple words that should never exist in the same sentence as those jewels, unless everything is perfectly documented and perfectly explained. And yet here they are, floating through the palace like a rumor with sharp edges, because nobody can give a straight answer about where they're going or why. The first signs of trouble don't come from a public leak. They come from the small disruptions only insiders notice. A vault access log that looks odd, timestamps that don't match the usual rhythm. Entries that feel too clean, too carefully placed. Schedules shift at the last minute, as if the palace is trying to create an alibi out of timing. Staff who usually speak freely suddenly go quiet, instructed to keep things simple, to avoid confusion, to let the senior officers handle it. Those phrases are the palace's favorite anesthetic. They sound reasonable, but they're designed to stop questions before they form. And the more people are told not to ask, the more the fear grows, because silence in a palace is rarely peace. It's containment. Charles's instinct kicks in immediately, the instinct of a monarch who has learned that public calm is a currency you cannot waste. Keep it private. Avoid scandal. Control the narrative before the narrative controls you. He doesn't treat this like theft. He treats it like fire, something that must be smothered before it spreads, even if smothering it means people inside the palace breathe less freely. Meetings tighten. Explanations become vague. Decisions become temporary measures. And beneath all of it is a clear priority. Make sure the public never suspects that the monarchy's most sacred symbols are being moved in the dark. But Charles isn't the only one moving fast. Anne and Sophie step in with a coordination that feels almost unsettling, because it suggests they anticipated this possibility long before it happened. Anne brings the institutional spine direct, disciplined, impossible to manipulate with charm. Sophie brings the quiet intelligence, the ability to listen without being noticed, to collect patterns before others even realize there's a picture forming. Their alliance is unexpected because it doesn't look like rebellion. It looks like competence. The kind of competence that terrifies a palace built on controlled uncertainty. They don't make accusations. They ask questions in the right order. They request documents the way people request air, politely, firmly, and without leaving room for refusal. And as they move, the story deepens into something darker, because the jewels weren't moved like objects being stored. They were moved like symbols being reassigned. That's the fear Anne won't say out loud at first, but carries in the way she pauses over each detail. These pieces aren't neutral. Whoever receives them receives a message, one the public will read, even if they don't understand why. Anne and Sophie begin to suspect the transfer isn't about safety or preservation. It's about positioning, about shaping Catherine's future image by controlling the visual language of legitimacy around her. Because if Catherine is meant to represent continuity, then keeping the Queen's jewels away from her isn't just an oversight. It's a statement. That's where the hidden plan begins to reveal itself. Someone intended to reassign symbolic power away from Catherine, not in a way that would cause open revolt, but in a way subtle enough to be called tradition, procedure, or practicality. a reshuffle that could be framed as routine if anyone dared to question it. The palace loves changes that can be explained with soft words. Appropriate. Adjusted. In line with protocol. But Anne and Sophie read those words like camouflage. They know the difference between an adjustment and an agenda. The tension escalates as they realize how carefully the palace is trying to seal the story. Staff glance away when questioned. Answers arrive half-formed. And the more resistance they meet, the more certain they become that this is not an innocent logistical move. Sophie notices something that makes her stomach tighten. Different people are repeating the same phrases as if coached. The same calm reassurances that don't actually contain information. Anne, meanwhile, doesn't accept fog as an answer. She pushes for proof. For authorization. For the line that connects decision to responsibility. Then comes the cliffhanger, the moment that turns suspicion into something sharp and undeniable. Anne obtains a document, not a rumor, not a whisper. A piece of paper with language that makes the air feel colder. The jewels were moved under special instruction. Those words don't clarify anything, they conceal everything. Special instruction from whom? For what purpose? Under what authority? And why does the wording feel designed to stop the investigation instead of supporting it? Anne doesn't look triumphant when she reads it. She looks grim, like someone realizing the palace isn't merely protecting the crown, it's protecting a choice. Sophie reads over her shoulder, and in that shared silence, a terrifying conclusion forms. This wasn't a simple relocation. It was a deliberate redirection planned, justified, and carefully disguised. And once Anne and Sophie realize the jewels weren't merely relocated but deliberately redirected, they stop asking who authorized it and start asking who benefits from Catherine being left out. The palace doesn't always hurt people with insults. Sometimes it hurts them with omissions. A missing invitation, a changed itinerary, a ceremonial detail quietly reassigned to someone else. Catherine doesn't collapse, she composes herself. But Anne and Sophie notice the shift instantly, because they know the monarchy speaks in symbols. And when the Queen's jewels are kept from Catherine, the message isn't subtle, it's surgical. Catherine remains poised the way she has been trained to be poised, the way the world expects her to be poised. She smiles at the right moments. She speaks with careful warmth. She doesn't let surprise show on her face, even when it arrives dressed as minor adjustments. But inside, something tightens, because she can feel it, the invisible recalibration happening around her. The way the palace suddenly moves like it's decided she must be placed, positioned, managed. She isn't being shouted at. She isn't being confronted. She's being edited. And in the monarchy, being edited is a form of power play that leaves no bruises but changes everything. It starts with the smallest cuts, a ceremony detail reassigned for consistency, a schedule note that arrives later than usual. A staff member who used to meet her eyes now looks down, as if eye contact itself is risky. The palace doesn't announce a demotion, it creates the impression of one. That's the cruelty of omission. Catherine is not stripped in public. She is quietly reduced behind the scenes, and the public is allowed to assume it's natural, just the way things are, just the way protocol flows. The missing jewels become the sharpest omission of all. Because those jewels aren't decorations. They are symbols of legitimacy, of continuity, of who is trusted to carry the monarchy's visual authority. Keeping them from Catherine isn't a logistical error. It's a calculated soft demotion disguised as procedure. Anne and Sophie read it immediately, because they understand the language of monarchy better than most people understand spoken words. They see how carefully the palace has arranged this. Catherine's calm on display, the institution's cold manoeuvring hidden in the margins. It's a contrast that stings. Catherine, dignified and steady, becomes the perfect canvas for the palace's quiet message, because her composure makes it easier for others to pretend nothing is wrong. She doesn't protest, she doesn't demand, she absorbs. And the palace, always hungry for silence, takes that absorption as permission. The staff fear is palpable in the air. Not dramatic fear, but cautious fear, the kind that makes people answer questions with fragments. It's being handled. It's under review. We'll confirm shortly. The kind of fear that turns normal sentences into careful shields. Anne notices the sudden silence first, because she has spent years watching how institutions behave when they're hiding something. Sophie notices the uneasy glances, the way aides coordinate with their eyes before speaking, the way certain names are avoided as if saying them might ignite a hidden fuse. And both women understand what this means. The palace isn't just moving objects, it's moving narrative. It's controlling Catherine's authority by controlling what she is allowed to represent. Because symbols do the job words can't do. If Catherine appears without the Queen's jewels, the public doesn't need a memo to understand the implied message. Her status is being adjusted. Her role is being paced. Her presence is being managed for the moment. And that management is always framed as protection. But Anne and Sophie see the deeper agenda. This isn't about keeping Catherine safe. It's about keeping Catherine controllable. About narrowing her influence into something polite and non-threatening, while others decide what the monarchy should look like. And who should be seen as central to it. The most painful part is that Catherine may not even be aware of the full extent. Not because she's unaware of symbolism, she isn't, but because the palace is skilled at insulating people from the truth, while claiming it is being kind. Catherine is given partial explanations. She's told things are in flux. She's assured everything is appropriate. But the details that matter most, the ones that reveal intent, are kept away from her like sharp objects. That's what makes the betrayal so quiet and so cruel. Decisions are being made around her name, using her image, while she is offered only the version of reality that keeps her calm and cooperative. Anne's anger remains controlled, because she knows emotion can be used against her. Sophie's concern sharpens into suspicion, because she knows omission is never random in a palace. They begin tracking the ripple effects, who signed off on the adjustments, who benefits from Catherine being visually reduced, who suddenly gains the spotlight when she is subtly dimmed. And the more they look, the more it feels like a deliberate effort to reshape perception before Catherine even realizes she's being reshaped. Then, Sophie hears the phrase that makes her stomach drop, delivered softly by someone who thinks they're being practical. Catherine won't need those for now. It's said like a logistical note, like a harmless decision. But Sophie hears the real meaning underneath it, and it's chilling. For now is how the palace tests a new reality. For now is how soft emotions begin. For now is how symbols get reassigned while everyone pretends it's temporary, until temporary becomes permanent. Sophie doesn't respond outwardly, she simply records it, because she understands that sentence is not about jewels. It's about permission, about who is allowed to carry legitimacy and who is expected to wait. Because the moment the palace decides someone won't need a symbol of legitimacy, it's no longer about jewelry, it's about who gets to represent the crown's future. Anne doesn't argue with emotion, she argues with memory. And memory, in a royal family, is dangerous because it comes with receipts. She reminds Charles of a promise made in a quieter time, when survival required boundaries that were never meant to be tested again. The jewels weren't just items. They were part of an understanding about legacy, about who carries the monarchy's symbolic weight. And Anne has no intention of letting that understanding be rewritten. When Anne steps into the conversation, the temperature changes not because she's loud, but because she's final. In this fictional world, she is the institution's hard spine, duty without softness, loyalty without flattery, truth without decoration. She doesn't walk in with accusations, she walks in with history. And history, in a palace, is a weapon, because it exposes patterns the present wants to disguise. Charles can try to frame the jewel movement as procedural, as temporary, as handled. But Anne doesn't respond to the comforting language. She responds to what the palace pretends doesn't exist. Precedent. She reminds him of a past agreement, A promise made when the monarchy was trying to survive a quieter crisis, one that demanded boundaries so painful they were never supposed to be reopened. Back then, symbolic items weren't treated like personal property. They were treated like stabilizers, carefully placed signals to keep the public narrative from fracturing. And in that understanding, Catherine's role was not optional. It was continuity. If the jewels represent legitimacy, then Catherine's access to them represents the monarchy's future standing in plain sight. Anne doesn't say this with warmth. She says it with the weight of someone who understands that symbols don't merely reflect power, they create it. Charles's conflict becomes visible in ways he can't hide behind royal composure. He's pulled in every direction at once: affection, optics, pressure from advisors who crave calm, and the deep fear of scandal that comes when the public senses internal disorder. He wants the story contained. He wants the palace to look stable. He wants the disagreement to stay private. But Anne forces him to confront what he's actually doing, allowing a symbolic demotion to occur while pretending it's a logistical decision. Anne frames it not as hatred of anyone, not as a vendetta, but as respect for what came before: the memory, the legacy, the promises made to prevent the monarchy from repeating its ugliest mistakes. And she warns him with a clarity that cuts deeper than anger: once symbols move, power follows. Once power follows, alliances shift. People who were quiet become bold. People who were loyal become calculating. The palace begins reassigning access, and access becomes influence. Anne recognizes the old pattern repeating itself: reassign symbols, reshape perception, and then claim the new reality was always tradition. That's how a monarchy rewrites status without ever announcing it. That's how a person is reduced while everyone smiles. While Anne holds the line with history, Sophie moves through the palace like a quiet blade. Sophie doesn't storm in. She listens. She watches. And she understands the palace's real language: who gets briefed, who gets excluded, who suddenly becomes unavailable. While others argue about tradition, Sophie follows the paper trail: staff movements, schedule edits, private messages that vanish minutes after being sent. She isn't looking for drama, she's looking for patterns. Because patterns reveal coordination, and coordination reveals intent. Sophie is underestimated in the way dangerous people often are trusted, liked, spoken of as steady, which is exactly how you move unnoticed in a place built on performance. Her influence is social, trust-based, threaded through people who don't usually make headlines: aides, secretaries, security staff. The ones who know how the palace actually functions when the cameras aren't there. She notices the subtle loyalty tests: certain staff suddenly reassigned, certain calls unanswered, certain approvals delayed. She notices secrecy being used like a weapon: fewer people know, fewer people can contradict. The less information travels, the easier it is to manufacture a truth later. And the more Sophie tracks it, the more disturbing it becomes. This isn't a simple decision made in a moment of caution. It's a plan. An internal faction shaping optics by reshuffling symbols, carefully repositioning what the public will see, and what Catherine will be denied. Sophie's motivation isn't personal rivalry, it's fairness and institutional survival. She understands that if the monarchy is willing to manipulate its own future queen through symbolism, then it's willing to do far worse behind closed doors. Her fear isn't only for Catherine, it's for what this reveals about the system itself. Then Sophie finds the twist that changes the entire terrain: multiple versions of the protocol note about the jewels. Not one clear instruction, but variations, slight changes in wording, different dates, different justifications, as if someone has been rewriting the paper trail in real time. That's when Sophie stops thinking miscommunication and starts thinking operation. Someone didn't just move the jewels. Someone planned the story around them, and they're adjusting the story as obstacles appear. Anne, meanwhile, delivers the line that freezes Charles in place. She doesn't threaten him. She warns him like an institution warning its own leader: you can't undo what this will start. The room goes still, because everyone understands what she means. If the jewels remain redirected, the monarchy sets a precedent it may never be able to reverse, one where Catherine's legitimacy becomes conditional, negotiable, managed. Sophie takes her discovery straight into the heart of the risk, and in the calmest voice imaginable, she identifies the first real vulnerability. The authorization doesn't match the chain of command. Not clean, not consistent, not legitimate in the way palace decisions are supposed to be legitimate. And once that mismatch exists, only two possibilities remain: either someone forged legitimacy, or someone senior approved it and is now pretending they didn't. And when Anne implies this decision could ignite consequences beyond the family, Sophie realizes the real fight isn't stopping a transfer, it's stopping a chain reaction. Because when authorization doesn't match the chain of command, it means either someone forged legitimacy or someone senior approved it and is now pretending they didn't. Charles wants this contained. Anne and Sophie want it corrected. Catherine wants dignity without drama. And the palace wants one thing above all: the illusion of unity. But unity built on silence isn't unity, it's control. Charles finds himself cornered by two women who won't flinch, and one future the monarchy can't afford to destabilize. And in that corner, every option becomes a betrayal of someone. The room around Charles feels polished, calm, perfectly arranged, yet the tension is so thick it could snap. He hears the palace machine humming behind the walls, advisors urging delay, softening language, suggesting review, offering timelines that stretch just far enough for the public to forget the question. They present it like strategy, like wisdom, like stability. But Charles knows what it really is: defense. Delay is how the palace survives uncomfortable truths. Delay is how it turns sharp moments into dull rumors. And right now he wants that dullness more than he wants clarity. Because clarity comes with consequences. Anne refuses to give him dullness. She presses precedent the way a judge presses evidence. Symbols matter, she insists, because symbols decide who the public believes in. Remove them, redirect them, play games with them, and you don't just upset a person, you destabilize continuity. Anne's voice isn't emotional, it's final. She is telling Charles that keeping the Queen's jewels away from Catherine creates long-term damage that cannot be smoothed over with a press line. Because once Catherine's legitimacy is treated as optional, the monarchy teaches everyone watching that legitimacy is negotiable. Sophie presses procedure with equal precision, and her calm is almost more unnerving than Anne's steel. She doesn't argue about feelings. She argues about the paper trail. The process is compromised, she says. The authorization doesn't match the chain of command. There are multiple versions of the same instruction. There are edits that appear after the fact. And that means something terrifying. Either someone forged legitimacy, or someone senior approved it and is now pretending they didn't. Sophie's words don't just challenge an action, they challenge the integrity of the palace's internal reality. Catherine, silent in all of this, becomes the center of the battlefield without ever speaking a line. That's what makes it so cruel. She is dignity under pressure, a future queen, forced into stillness while others decide what symbols she needs. The palace's cold maneuvering relies on her composure, because her composure is the shield that keeps the public from seeing how sharp the internal fight has become, and Charles feels that pressure too. He is trying to protect unity, but the unity he's protecting is the kind that demands Catherine stay calm, while others rearrange her status in the shadows. He weighs optics like a weapon in his hand. Public stability versus admitting internal fracture. If he corrects this publicly, he risks headlines that imply the monarchy is divided. If he corrects it privately, he risks looking weak inside his own walls. If he does nothing, he risks something worse, a legitimacy crisis that grows slowly, quietly, until it can't be contained. Because the longer those jewels remain in transit, the more people inside the palace will whisper. And once whispers become patterns, Patterns become beliefs. Charles knows the monarchy can survive many scandals, but it struggles to survive the loss of belief. That's when he asks the question that reveals his true fear, and it lands like ice in the room. Who else knows? It isn't curiosity. It's damage control. Because if too many people know, it's already out of his hands. If too many people know, it's already a story. And if it's already a story, then this isn't about a family disagreement anymore. It's about whether the palace has been infiltrated by its own factions. There's a moment when the palace stops pretending this is manageable. Anne and Sophie reach it together. They don't threaten with headlines. They threaten with structure, with lawful clarity, institutional pressure, and a timeline that eliminates the palace's favorite weapon: delay. And when Charles realizes they're willing to force a formal correction, he understands the terrifying truth. This isn't an argument. It's a countdown. Anne and Sophie coordinate like two halves of the same blade. One anchors precedent. What the jewels mean. What was promised. What cannot be rewritten without consequence. The other anchors proof, the flawed paperwork, the mismatched authorization, the procedural corruption that suggests an operation, not a mistake. They make it simple. Return the jewels to Catherine, immediately and properly, or face formal exposure through channels the palace cannot silence with soft language. Not tabloid chaos, structured consequence. The kind that produces records. The kind that forces accountability. The palace panics because visibility is the enemy. Delay is the defense. And Anne and Sophie have removed delay from the board. Charles feels betrayed not only by the people who moved the jewels, but by the image-first machine that keeps trying to protect him, by making him smaller, by asking him to accept ambiguity as safety. He is trapped between doing what is right and doing what looks calm, and he can feel how quickly the institution turns calm into a cage. Anne repeats the line that carries the weight of history like a warning bell. This was never meant to be revisited. Not nostalgia, not sentiment. A boundary built out of survival, now being tested by people who think time has erased consequences. Sophie, colder now, implies what Charles doesn't want to hear. The dual move benefits a specific faction. Names remain unspoken, but the intent is obvious in the way certain advisors suddenly want more time, in the way certain offices suddenly become unavailable, in the way the palace tries to turn urgency into bureaucracy. And just as the ultimatum tightens into inevitability, Sophie receives the warning that proves how dangerous being right can be in a palace. If you push this, they'll call you disloyal and make it stick. The threat isn't physical, it's narrative. Because in royal warfare, reputation is the blade that never stops cutting. And when Charles realizes how many people might already know, the conflict stops being about family, it becomes about whether the palace is facing a mistake or an internal operation. And in the monarchy's most brutal tradition, they know the danger isn't being wrong, it's being right in a way the system can't afford to admit. The jewels come back the way disasters get resolved in palaces, quietly, neatly, with language designed to make it seem like nothing happened. Catherine receives them with composure that breaks hearts, because she understands what the gesture is meant to repair, and what it can't. Anne and Sophie didn't just force a return. They forced the palace to admit, without saying it, that someone tried to move Catherine's legitimacy like a chess piece. It happens without ceremony, without apology, without a single sentence that acknowledges the damage. A discreet note arrives, written in the soft, bureaucratic language the palace uses when it wants reality to feel optional, clarified, reviewed, aligned. Words that sound comforting but mean nothing unless you already know the truth. And Catherine, standing at the center of this carefully managed correction, accepts the return with the same controlled grace she's always shown: calm face, steady posture, voice measured like it's been trained not to crack even when the moment deserves honesty. That composure is what breaks people's hearts, because it isn't ignorance, it's endurance. Catherine feels the subtext even if she never speaks it out loud. They are trying to fix a symbol while pretending they never shattered it. The emotional weight deepens in the quiet aftermath. The jewels resting where they should have been all along do not erase the fact that they were moved in the first place. Catherine understands that the gesture is meant to repair perception, to restore the image of continuity. Yet what it can't repair is trust, not fully. Because someone inside those walls made a decision that treated her legitimacy as negotiable. Someone looked at the Queen's symbols and thought they could be redistributed like assets rather than honored like commitments. And once that kind of thought exists in a palace, it doesn't vanish just because a box returns to a vault. Anne doesn't celebrate. She doesn't soften. She watches. Her victory is not a triumphant moment, it's a temporary containment. She knows retaliation in a palace rarely arrives as punishment. It arrives as procedural adjustments. It arrives as exclusions disguised as scheduling. It arrives as quiet rewrites of influence. Anne's face stays composed, but her attention is sharper than ever, because she understands the real danger now. They proved the palace could be challenged, and challenged institutions often respond by tightening control. Sophie feels it too, the shift in staff behavior, the tightening alliances, the way silence thickens like fog. People become more cautious with their words, more guarded with their expressions. Conversations end faster when certain names enter a room. Smiles look the same, but they don't land the same. The palace has restored the public calm, yet privately the damage remains, spreading through the corridors in subtle ways. Trust cracks under politeness. Everyone keeps performing normal, yet the building feels less safe, because everyone now knows something they weren't supposed to know. Symbols can be moved, and reality can be rewritten if nobody stops it. Then comes the twist hidden in the return itself. The note that accompanies the jewels includes new conditions disguised as procedure, tiny lines that look administrative but carry strategic intent. A new approval step. A new custodial review clause. A new requirement that certain movements be coordinated through the appropriate office. It's control disguised as order, and Sophie reads it like a warning shot. Because the palace isn't just returning the jewels, it's attempting to install new rules around them so the next redirection can happen with cleaner paperwork and fewer vulnerabilities. That's when Sophie notices the detail that turns relief into dread. A calendar entry. Not public, not announced. Quietly placed where only insiders would see it. Symbolic Assets Review Phase 2. The words are sterile, but the meaning is brutal. Phase 2 means the first attempt wasn't a mistake. It was a trial. It was a test of resistance, a measurement of who would react, who would stay silent, who would protect Catherine, and who would prefer she remain manageable. Phase 2 means someone is already redesigning the strategy to be harder to stop, wrapped in better language, supported by stronger signatures, shielded by more careful timing. Then comes the statement. Measured, polished, reassuring. A promise of unity that feels strangely empty, like a smile held too long. Publicly, it's routine, misunderstandings resolved, priorities aligned, family stronger than ever. The palace calls it misconstrued, resolved internally, aligned. A tidy narrative built to keep the public from imagining what truly happened. But inside the palace, nobody relaxes. Because Anne and Sophie proved something terrifying, the monarchy can be steered by secrecy or stopped by someone willing to expose it. Anne's stance holds for now, but the backlash sharpens behind the scenes. Catherine appears calm publicly, but privately the emotional burden lingers, because calm does not mean unmarked. Staff culture shifts into deeper caution, fewer candid conversations, more carefully worded emails, more glances over shoulders, as if reputation itself has become a weapon. Charles faces his own reckoning in the silence. After the statement, did he restore order, or did he simply postpone collapse? Because the palace didn't solve the problem. It contained the symptom. And the symptom was never just the jewels. It was the willingness to manipulate what the jewels represent. The final twist settles in slowly. Symbol control has become precedent. Factions adjust strategy quietly. They don't abandon the goal, they refine the method. They learn who resists and who submits. They learn which paperwork can be challenged, and which paperwork must be manufactured more carefully. And somewhere, beneath the polished statements and careful smiles, a whisper moves through the palace like a signal. The next conflict is already forming. Because this one revealed the fault lines, and fault lines don't disappear. They wait. Because if the palace is already scheduling a phase 2, then the return wasn't the end, it was the start of the next attempt, redesigned to be harder to stop. And if you think this ends here, remember, palaces don't forget resistance. They simply wait for the next moment to rewrite the rules again. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.